A digital wireframe pulses on a monitor. Blue and red flow lines rush past a hydrofoil shape. This shape belonged to an animal from the late Cretaceous. Roughly 70 million years ago. It was a plesiosaur. Picture it suspended in the dark, plankton-rich waters of the southern hemisphere. For over a century, scientists argued about how it moved. The bones presented a biomechanical paradox. It had 4 identical, rigid flippers. Did it roll like a duck? Or fly like a penguin? The bones alone could not answer. It took modern fluid dynamics to finally read the fossilized shoulder girdles. It revealed a highly derived hydrofoil engine. But how did an air-breathing amniote evolve this machinery in the first place? How did terrestrial reptiles reverse engineer themselves to conquer the oceans? And how does the fossil record prove it? Over 90% of marine species vanished entirely. The complex reef systems collapsed. Global temperatures spiked. The waters grew stagnant and acidic in a total system failure. The extinction left a massive ecological void. The shallow coastal shelves were stripped of the food webs that had thrived there for millions of years. The competition was gone. On land, terrestrial life was struggling to recover in a harsh, overheated environment. Food was hard to find. But the empty oceans offered a vast, untapped frontier. Any terrestrial animal capable of adapting to the water would find absolute freedom. Evolution is not a conscious planner. It is a blind, mechanical process. It simply repurposes existing biological constraints to exploit open niches. In the early Triassic, terrestrial reptiles began to wade into the shallows. They were looking for food. Over generations, the animals that could hold their breath slightly longer or swim slightly faster survived to pass on those traits. The transformation was underway. Present-day context. It is a common cultural reflex to look at massive, extinct reptiles and call them all dinosaurs. This is a myth. The fossil record draws a very strict anatomical line. A dinosaur is defined by specific architecture in its hips and legs. Their limbs are locked directly beneath their bodies in an upright stance. They are built specifically for walking on land. The marine predators that eventually conquered the Mesozoic oceans were not dinosaurs. They came from completely separate, older branches of the reptile family tree. They were amniotes. They possessed terrestrial lungs, 4 limbs, and they reproduced via shelled eggs. To survive in the water, they had to reverse engineer their own anatomy. They had to transform walking legs into paddles. They had to adapt to a medium that actively resisted their fundamental biology. The record is clear. The fossil evidence documents this transition in careful, sequential stages. Middle Triassic, about 240 million years ago. Reconstruction, constrained by fossilized vertebrae and skull morphology. We picture an early pioneer. This is Cymbospondylus. It is a primitive ichthyosaur moving through the warm waters of a shallow epicontinental sea. The body is highly elongated. It moves with a lateral, side-to-side undulation of its entire spine. It looks more like an eel than a dolphin. It measures roughly 10 meters long. This puts it on the order of a small city buzz. SRC01, Motani. 1999. There is no pronounced dorsal fin yet. It is a transitional form. It carries the heavy biological echoes of its land-dwelling ancestors. We can't tell the exact color of Cymbospondylus from this evidence. What it does support is an elongated, hydrodynamic profile. The bones tell a story of gradual refinement. The skull is already stretching out to form a long, narrow snout. The jaws are lined with sharp, conical teeth. This suggests a diet focused on fast-moving bony fish and cephalopods. The animal is a formidable predator. But it is still tied to the surface. It must breathe air. Present-day, fossil analysis. Inside a paleontology lab. A digital monitor illuminates a darkened room. On the screen is a bright white anatomical line drawing of a human arm. It details the humerus, the radius, the ulna, and the 5 distinct rows of finger bones. Slowly, the image morphs. A new skeletal diagram overlays the human hand. It is the fossilized front limb of an advanced marine reptile. The underlying architecture is exactly the same. It is a shared inheritance from a common terrestrial ancestor, but the proportions have warped dramatically. The arm bones are compressed into short, blocky discs. Extending outward from the wrist are dozens of extra knuckles. The digits have multiplied. A single finger line might contain 20 or more individual bones tightly packed together. This condition is known as hyperphalangy. It is a profound structural modification. SRC01, Motani. 1999. The extra bones lock together. They form a rigid, paddle-like flipper. It cannot bend to grasp objects. It is completely useless for walking on land. It functions solely as a hydrofoil to steer through the dense, resistive medium of water. This is how evolution solves a biomechanical problem. It takes what is already there and stretches it. The structural changes were happening rapidly. Within a few million years, the oceans were hosting a diverse array of these early marine reptiles. They were optimizing their limbs. They were smoothing their profiles to reduce drag. They were becoming absolute masters of the coastal waters. But a severe biological tether remained. As amniotes, their ancestors laid eggs on dry land. The earliest marine reptiles likely had to haul their heavy, increasingly clumsy bodies onto the beaches to reproduce. It was a dangerous necessity. Sea turtles still perform this exhausting labor today. Water supports mass. On land, a 10-meter animal with paddle-like limbs faces the full, crushing force of gravity. A stranded marine reptile risks suffocating under its own weight. This reproductive anchor prevented them from fully committing to the open, deep-water ocean. They were coastal prisoners. To truly conquer the sea, they would have to break the final tie to the shore. Present-day, Hull's Marden Shale Quarry. A stiff bristle brush sweeps grey dust off a flat, dark slate rock surface. Sunlight glints off a metallic pick. A researcher carefully taps the edge of the stone. The rock splits perfectly along a bedding plane. The newly exposed surface is coal black. This is the Posidonia Shale in southern Germany. It is an extraordinary geologic formation. At the bottom of an ancient Jurassic sea, the water became completely devoid of oxygen. It was anoxic. Dead animals sinking into this mud were not torn apart by scavengers. They were not degraded by bacteria. They were entombed. The pressure of millions of years flattened them into two-dimensional silhouettes. The preservation here is a rare phenomenon known as a lagerstat. The researcher brushes away the final layer of dust. A complete fossil skeleton emerges against the dark rock. But there is more than just bone. Surrounding the skeleton is a faint, dark halo pressed into the stone. It is the carbonized residue of the animal's skin and blubber. The fossil shows a smooth, teardrop shape with a distinct dorsal fin and a crescent tail. Present-day, fossil analysis. The slab rests under harsh laboratory lights. The skeleton belongs to Stenopterygius, an advanced ichthyosaur from the early Jurassic. The preservation is so fine that scientists can study the contents of the stomach. But the most important detail lies lower down the spine. In the pelvic cavity of the adult skeleton, surrounded by the ribs, are a cluster of tiny, fully formed bones. They belong to several miniature ichthyosaurs. SRC02, Butcher. 1990. One of the tiny skeletons is positioned partially outside the adult's pelvic region. It is pointing tail first. This fossil captures a moment of birth. The orientation of the fossilized neonate, exiting the pelvic cavity tail first, mirrors modern cetaceans. If the infant emerged head first, it would likely inhale water and drown before the birth was complete. A tail-first delivery allows the newborn to reach the surface for its first breath immediately after breaking free. This provides taphonomic evidence of viviparity. They gave birth to live young. SRC02, Butcher. 1990. This discovery forces a massive reframe of their evolutionary history. The transition is complete. The biological anchor to the land is severed. They never had to drag their bodies onto a beach again. Early Jurassic, about 180 million years ago. Reconstruction, guided by the carbonized halos of the Holzmaden fossils. A pod of Stenopterygius moves through open water. They are fully pelagic. Their bodies are perfectly streamlined, mirroring the shape of modern dolphins. It is a stunning example of convergent evolution. Two entirely different lineages, one reptilian, one mammalian, arriving at the exact same aerodynamic solution for moving through water. A female rides near the surface. A miniature version of the adult emerges from her tail flukes first. As soon as the infant is free, it kicks upward. It breaks the surface tension. It inhales air into its lungs, and dives back into the pod. They are entirely creatures of the sea. We can't tell the exact frequency of ichthyosaur births from this evidence. What it does support is that they possessed the anatomical mechanics for viviparity. By eliminating the egg, ichthyosaurs gained access to the entire global ocean. They could cross deep water basins. They radiated into hundreds of specialized forms. Some hunted small fish. Others developed massive teeth to crack ammonite shells. For tens of millions of years, ichthyosaurs were the undisputed masters of speed in the Mesozoic oceans. Present-day context. A phylogenetic map charts the explosive radiation of marine reptiles. The ichthyosaurs command the open water. But the coastal shallows and the complex reef systems are filling up with a different group of predators. They are the sauropterygians. They took a completely different evolutionary path. While ichthyosaurs became compact and dolphin-like, these new predators elongated their necks. They developed massive, barrel-shaped bodies. They are the plesiosaurs. They present one of the most frustrating biomechanical puzzles in paleontology. They possessed a unique structural anatomy never seen before or since. Most aquatic animals use a single primary method of propulsion. A shark uses its tail. A frog uses its hind legs. A sea turtle uses its front flippers. Plesiosaurs had four massive, identically shaped, rigid flippers, for over a century. Scientists argued over how they moved. The initial assumption was simple. They must have rowed. The early models suggested they pulled their flippers backward simultaneously, like a duck paddling or a human rowing a boat. It is a drag-based method of swimming. But the fossilized shoulder and pelvic girdles tell a different story. The bones are heavily reinforced. The muscle attachment points on the underside of the body are massive. If they were rowing, pushing water backward on the power stroke, the recovery stroke would create a huge amount of forward resistance. The animal would constantly surge and stall. The anatomy suggests something far more complex. Present-day context. The late 1990s popularized a staggering image. Television documentaries reconstructed a marine reptile called Leopleurodon. They claimed it was a 25-meter leviathan. They said it weighed over 100 tons. It was depicted as the undisputed apex predator of the Jurassic. It was capable of biting a small whale in half. It is a terrifying concept. It is also entirely fictional. The 25-meter Leopleurodon is a myth. It was born from a chain of media exaggeration and fragmented fossil estimates. This snowball effect created an accepted pop culture fact. But paleontology is bound by physical evidence. The bones impose strict biological scaling limits. We cannot simply stretch a predator to the size of a blue whale without the skeleton to prove it. To find the real apex predators, we have to measure the anatomy. Present-day, museum collection. Inside a sterile, climate-controlled vault, a researcher stands over a large fossil skull. The researcher wears white nitrile gloves. They hold a pair of silver metal calipers. The calipers are placed against the base of a massive fossilized tooth. They measure the width of the root. The skull belongs to a plesiosaur. Plesiosaurs are the robust, short-necked cousins of the long-necked plesiosaurs. They share the same flip-or-flight mechanism. But they abandoned stealth for brute force. The skull on the table is heavily built. It is solid bone. It is designed to withstand immense biomechanical stress. The teeth are not thin and needle-like. These teeth are thick, conical, and deeply rooted into the jaw. They are built for crushing. The researcher measures the total length of the intact skull. It is impressive. It measures around 1.5 meters long. To estimate the total length of the animal, scientists cannot just guess. They must use morphometrics. They compare this isolated skull to rare, complete skeletons of closely related plesiosaurs. Across the plesiosaur family, the head makes up roughly 1/5 to 1/4 of the total body length. We apply this strict biological ratio to the largest known Leopleurodon skulls. The math is unforgiving. Morphometric scaling of intact plesiosaur specimens caps the maximum length of Leopleurodon at roughly 7 meters. It was not a 25-meter monster. It was about the length of a standard pickup truck, Middle Jurassic, about 160 million years ago. Reconstruction: a Leopleurodon patrols the Oxford Clay Sea. At 7 meters long. It is highly muscular. The head is massive. It uses its flippers to accelerate rapidly in short, violent bursts. It is an ambush predator. It does not need to be the size of a whale to dominate. In its ecosystem, it is the absolute apex. It hunts large fish, sharks, and other marine reptiles. We can't tell the absolute maximum size a Leopleurodon could ever reach from this evidence. What it does support is a strict biological scaling limit far below the 25-meter myth. Evolution tends to cap the size of hypercarnivores. A 25-meter predator would require a staggering amount of meat. The ecosystem simply could not support a population of animals that large, but even at 7 meters. The plesiosaurs were highly successful. They partitioned the ocean. The plesiosaurs ruled the ambush niches. The ichthyosaurs ruled the high-speed pursuit niches. The long-necked plesiosaurs ruled the stealth fishing niches. The ocean was packed. Every available predatory role was filled, and then the balance shifted. Late Cretaceous, about 75 million years ago. Reconstruction: the global climate is shifting. The continents are breaking apart. They form shallow, warm interior seaways across North America and Europe. But the cast of characters has changed. The ichthyosaurs are gone. After ruling the oceans for nearly 100 million years, their fossils simply disappear from the rock record. They were unable to adapt to the changing oceans. Or they were outcompeted. The vacuum left by the ichthyosaurs and the declining plesiosaurs was rapidly filled. A completely new lineage of reptiles seized the opportunity. They are the mosasaurs. They did not slowly evolve in the deep ocean. They were coastal lizards, closely related to modern monitor lizards. In a geologic blink of an eye, they invaded the water. They adapted paddle-like limbs. They developed live birth. They exploded in size. They became the ultimate usurpers. They were aggressive. They were highly adaptable. And the fossil record proves they were utterly ruthless. Present-day fossil analysis. A digital 3D model of a massive mosasaur skull rotates on a screen. This is Prognathodon. The jaws are lined with stout, bone-crushing teeth. As the digital model is segmented, slicing away the outer jawbone, a second set of teeth is revealed. They are hidden deep inside the roof of the mouth. These are the pterygoid teeth. Mosasaurs could not chew. Their jaws were hinged to open incredibly wide. But they could not grind their food. If a prognathodon caught a massive, struggling prey item, it risked the prey slipping out of its mouth. The pterygoid teeth solved this. Once the main jaws clamped down, the internal teeth on the palate would pull backward. They ratcheted the prey hole down the animal's throat. It is a highly specialized feeding mechanism identical to modern snakes. But what were they swallowing whole? Present-day fossil analysis. A skeletal diagram maps out the ribcage of a beautifully preserved prognathodon specimen. Inside the stomach cavity of the giant predator, there is a chaotic jumble of broken bone. Paleontologists isolated the fragments. They found the remains of large sea turtles. But the most shocking discovery lay right in the center of the gut. The rib cage of Prognathodon contains the partially digested skull of a smaller mosasaur. SRC04, Konishi et al. 2011, Late Cretaceous. Reconstruction, a 14-meter Prognathodon surges upward from the depths. Its bilobe tail provides explosive acceleration. Its jaws unhinge. It strikes a smaller, younger mosasaur. The teeth crush through bone. The pterygoid palate teeth engage. They pull the struggling rival down its throat. We can't tell if Prognathodon hunted exclusively by ambush from this evidence. What it does support is a diet consisting of large, hard-shelled prey and other mosasaurs. Intraguild predation is a sign of a hyper-competitive, packed ecosystem. Apex predators eating each other proves the intensity. The late Cretaceous ocean was a brutal arena. The mosasaurs occupied every major predatory niche. They were the undisputed kings of the sea. They had conquered the physiological limits of the amniote body. They had warm blood. They gave live birth. They possessed perfectly adapted hydrofoil limbs and bone-crushing jaws. They were unstoppable, but their dominance relied entirely on a fragile foundation. They required massive amounts of food. They needed the long, unbroken chain of life beneath them to remain stable. The fish, the squid, the plankton had to survive. If that chain broke, the giants would fall first. Late Cretaceous, about 70 million years ago. Reconstruction, in the dark, plankton-rich waters of the southern hemisphere. A massive shadow drifts into view. This is Aristonectes. It belongs to a highly specialized family of plesiosaurs known as elasmosaurids. It is a bizarre animal. Its neck is incredibly long, accounting for more than half its total body length. It contains over 70 cervical vertebrae. Below the neck hangs a wide, rigid torso. It ends in 4 massive flipper pedals. The animal hangs suspended in the water column. It does not look agile. It looks front-heavy and physically unbalanced. How this animal moved efficiently enough to hunt without exhausting itself has been heavily debated. Present-day, biomechanics simulation. On the modern computer monitor, a digital wireframe model of a plesiosaur flipper sits inside a fluid dynamics tunnel. Blue and red flow lines rush past the shape. Scientists are testing the physics of the ancient bones. The flippers are not flat pedals. They are shaped like hydrofoils. They taper at the trailing edge just like an airplane wing. When the model is set to a rowing motion, the digital water piles up in front of the flippers. The drag is immense. The efficiency is terrible. The animal would burn massive amounts of calories just to maintain forward momentum. Then, the researchers program the computer to simulate a different motion. They set the flippers to perform a complex figure-8 pattern. The flipper sweeps down and forward. Then it twists and sweeps up and backward. It is a lift-based propulsion system. The flipper operates exactly like a bird's wing, generating lift in the air. It mirrors a penguin swimming underwater. It is subaqueous flight. SRC03, Muscat et al. 2017. The simulation reveals something even more striking. The mystery of the 4 flippers finds an answer. When the front flipper sweeps down, it creates a swirling vortex of water behind it. This is a wake. The digital model shows that if the rear flipper beats slightly out of phase with the front, it catches this vortex. The rear flipper rides the slipstream. Digital modeling suggests the wake of the front flippers creates a slipstream that enhances the thrust of the rear flippers. SRC03, Muscat et al. 2017. They are not redundant. The 4-flipper system is a highly derived, incredibly efficient hydrofoil engine. Models show it increases total thrust by nearly 60% compared to using the front flippers alone. Deep past reconstruction, the Aristonectes beats its front flippers down in a graceful arc. A split second later, the rear flippers follow. It does not row. It flies through the water. The motion is smooth and continuous. There is no stalling. The long neck remains perfectly stable. This allows the small head to dart into a school of fish without alerting them. We can't tell the exact top speed of Aristonyx from this evidence. What it does support is a highly efficient, lift-based method of subaqueous flight. They were elegant cruisers. They could cross vast distances of open ocean using very little energy. But this highly active lifestyle raises a serious physiological problem. Living like a high-speed pursuit predator or a long-distance cruiser requires massive amounts of energy. A modern reptile, like an iguana or a sea snake, is ectothermic. It is cold-blooded. Its internal body temperature is dictated entirely by the surrounding water. Ectotherms are capable of short, explosive bursts of speed. But they exhaust quickly. They must bask in the sun to recharge. If ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs were cold-blooded, their hunting capabilities would be severely restricted. They could not dive into the cold, deep ocean basins without their muscles seizing up. For decades, the dominant reconstruction assumed they were sluggish, coast-hugging lizards. But the fossilized bones hide a distinct chemical signature. It shatters this assumption. Present-day, isotope laboratory. Gloved hands carefully tap white powder from a small metal tool into a tiny glass scientific vial. A researcher extracts enamel from the fossilized tooth of a marine reptile. The powder goes into a mass spectrometer. The machine looks for isotopes. It measures the ratio of oxygen-18 to oxygen-16 trapped inside the tooth. Present-day context. The ratio of these two isotopes is tied to temperature. When the animal was alive, building its teeth, the chemical composition of the enamel locked in a record. It captured its internal body heat relative to the ocean water around it. It acts as a deep time thermometer. If the animal was cold-blooded, the isotope ratios in the tooth would match the temperature signature of the ancient seawater. The machine reads the sample. The ratios do not match the water. The data indicates that the animal's internal temperature was significantly higher than the surrounding ocean. While debate continues over the exact mechanisms, isotope studies argue that advanced marine reptiles possessed elevated metabolic rates. They were endothermic. They were warm-blooded. SRC 05, Bernadette al. 2010. This chemical evidence triggers a profound reframe. They were not sluggish lizards. They were high-octane, warm-blooded biological engines. They could generate their own internal heat. Late Jurassic, about 150 million years ago. Reconstruction, guided by the isotope data. An ophthalmosaurus dives into the deep ocean. It leaves the sunlit surface waters behind. It is an ichthyosaur built for extreme depth. The water temperature drops rapidly as it descends into the black. A cold-blooded reptile would freeze and sink here. But the ophthalmosaurus keeps swimming. Its internal furnace keeps its muscles firing. Present-day, fossil analysis. A diagram highlights the skull of an ophthalmosaurus. Inside the massive eye socket sits a ring of thin, overlapping bones. This is the sclerotic ring. It acts to support the eyeball against extreme water pressure. The ring is enormous. It sometimes measures over 20 centimeters across. It is one of the largest eyes relative to body size in the history of vertebrate life. Giant eyes gather faint light in the dark. Warm blood fuels the muscles. Together, the anatomy and the chemistry reconstruct a deep-sea pursuit predator. It hunted squid in the midnight zone. We can't tell their precise internal body temperature to the decimal from this evidence. What it does support is a metabolic rate significantly higher than modern cold-blooded reptiles. They had broken every boundary. They were fast. They gave live birth. They could hunt anywhere in the ocean, but with a high metabolism comes a massive demand for calories. An endothermic predator must eat constantly. As the Jurassic period progressed, the oceans became crowded. The competition for food intensified. The pressure was on to secure top of the food chain. Some marine reptiles stopped hunting small fish and squid. They started hunting each other. The era of the hypercarnivores had begun. Late Cretaceous, about 66 million years ago. Reconstruction, the shallow interior seaway is teeming with life. A massive mosasaur breaks the surface to breathe. Its dark silhouette slides back beneath the waves. Above, the sky is a pale, dusty blue. There is no warning in the water. The pressure wave hits first. The atmosphere tears open. An asteroid, roughly 10 kilometers across, slams into the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact releases energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs. The immediate devastation is absolute. Tsunamis dredge the coastlines. A thermal pulse ignites forests across the hemisphere. But the true killer is not the initial blast. It is the material ejected into the sky. Vaporized rock, sulfur, and soot are blasted into the upper atmosphere. The debris spreads. It forms a dense, suffocating blanket around the entire planet. The sun is blocked out. The oceans are plunged into a deep, prolonged twilight. Present-day, field site. A researcher stands beside a crumbling rock face. They carefully scrape away dirt with a small trowel. They expose a very specific, thin layer of grey clay. It is no thicker than a human finger. This is the KPG boundary. Below this line lies the Cretaceous. Above it lies the Paleogene, present-day, fossil analysis. Under a high-powered microscope, a sample of this boundary clay is analyzed. The researcher is not looking for dinosaur bones. They are looking for microscopic crystals. The screen displays jagged, fractured grains of shocked quartz. These microscopic fractures can only be created by the immense, instantaneous pressure of a hypervelocity impact. The boundary layer also contains a massive spike in iridium. This element is rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids. The physical evidence for the impact is locked in the stone. Present-day context. In the limestone layers immediately below the iridium line, the rock is packed with fossils. They are the shells of calcareous nanoplankton. These microscopic, photosynthetic organisms were the absolute foundation of the marine food web. They harvested sunlight to survive. They fed the krill fed the fish fed the squid, which fed the mosasaurs. In the boundary clay, and in the layers immediately above it, the nanoplankton vanish. The KPG boundary layer is defined by an abrupt cessation of calcareous nanoplankton fossils. Without sunlight, photosynthesis stopped. The base of the food web simply ceased to exist. Deep past reconstruction, the darkness stretches on for years. The shallow seas grow cold and acidic from sulfur rain. The fish populations crash. The squid die off. The giant, warm-blooded marine reptiles require massive amounts of calories just to keep their internal engines running. But the ocean is empty. Evolution had pushed them to be the ultimate apex predators. They were hyper-specialized giants. But in a collapsing ecosystem, gigantism is a fatal flaw. You cannot survive if you cannot eat. The end is slow, quiet, and absolute. The giant reptiles simply starve. We can't tell the exact day the last mosasaur died from this evidence. What it does support is a sudden, systemic collapse of their food web. Their reign, which lasted for over 160 million years, is over. They cross the boundary line. And they are gone forever. The oceans are empty once again. Present-day context. The marine reptiles of the Mesozoic were an astonishing evolutionary experiment. They proved that life will exploit every available niche. They did this even if it required reverse engineering millions of years of terrestrial adaptation. They severed their ties to the land. They learned to fly underwater. They fueled their massive bodies with warm blood. They were not a single dynasty. They were three separate invasions of the sea. The ichthyosaurs, the plesiosaurs, and the mosasaurs converged on the exact same anatomical solutions. The physics of water demanded it. When the oceans finally recovered from the asteroid impact, the niches were open once again. And once again, terrestrial animals waded into the shallows to feed. The limbs shortened. The nostrils migrated to the tops of their heads. The tails flattened into flukes. The exact same biomechanical pressures produced a new dynasty of warm-blooded, live-bearing marine predators. But this time, they were mammals. They were the whales. The marine reptiles are gone. But the evidence of their long, brutal, and spectacular reign remains locked in the dark shale. It is waiting to be read.